I also mean to show the propaganda meant to disrespect the National Party unjustly rubbed off on the riot units. Most of us were good people and deserved better than the rumors made us out to be. I hope to expose the true nature of the men who put their lives on the line day after day and night after night. To this day, the vital role the riot units played in the transition of South Africa to a democratic country has never been acknowledged by the public or the authorities. Maybe I can help put the record straight. Okay, so I'm going to go into the background of War and Peace, and this is a bit of a long section. So I might, no, it's not that long. Okay, cool. So it's background to War and Peace. So this is basically going to cover, the political scene at the time and why we were so heavily involved and what was going on. So in 1984 marked the beginning of what became known as the People's War in South Africa. The ANC and the SACP, so the ANC being the African National Congress and the SACP being the South African Communist Party, basically the same thing, were distributing pamphlets and magazines via their underground networks, which contained current news and information on how to make petrol bombs. This campaign was designed to arm local militants with background data and the know-how needed to destabilize South Africa. The struggle was being intensified, and the ANC began their campaign to make South Africa ungovernable. On the 8th of January 1984, Oliver Tambo released a statement calling for 4 pillars of revolution. People's War. Our revolutionary struggle rests on 4 pillars. These are, first, an all-round vanguard activity of the underground structures of the ANC. Second, the united mass action of the people. Third, our armed offensive, spearheaded by Umkhonto we Sizwe. And fourth, the international drive to isolate the apartheid regime and win worldwide moral, political, and material support for the struggle. We must begin to use our accumulated strength to destroy the organs of government of the apartheid regime. We should direct our collective might to rendering the enemy's instruments of authority unworkable. The march forward must mean that we advance against the regime's organs of state power, creating conditions in which the country becomes increasingly ungovernable. The apartheid regime maintains an extensive administration system through which it directs our lives. This system includes the organs of central and provincial government, the army and the police, the judiciary, and the Bantustan administration. The community council and the community councils. It is these institutions of apartheid power that we must attack and demolish. Needless to say, as strategists, we must select for attack those parts of the enemy administration system which we have the power to destroy as a result of our united and determined offensive. We must hit the enemy where it is weakest. We should not allow the community councils to be imposed on us. We do not want them. We must ensure that these cease to exist. Where administration boards take over their functions, then these must be destroyed too. That's what Oliver Tambo said. What followed were school boycotts, where schools were burned down and scholars ran rampant in the streets, setting cars and houses alight. Ward councillors who were seen to be supporting the apartheid government were attacked on a daily basis. The most publicized incident was that of Councillor Dlamini of Sharpeville. His home was under constant attack from the residents who showered his house with stones and petrol bombs. He opened fire on the mob and eventually had to flee his blazing home. The mob outside got hold of him and doused him in petrol and set him alight and watched as he burned to death. This was a common fate for a lot of councillors around the Vol Triangle in the weeks, months, and years to come. These attacks remained largely unreported in the media as the ANC propaganda machine began rolling out its plan. As 1985 rolled in, the violence and unrest intensified. The Eastern Cape town of Uitenhage was the most affected. Politicized funerals were becoming the order of the day, with militants being sent from everywhere to selected venues to stir up the emotions of the funeral goers. School teachers were ordered to house and feed these comrades and were allocated 4 per household. These funerals became a medium throughout which support would be drummed up for the ANC by means of playing on the emotions of the people. At one funeral in Duduza, which was just outside Nigel, funnily enough, on the East Rand, Maki Skosana, who was attending the funeral as a mourner, was rumored. A rumor was passed that she was a police informer. Before she could flee, the rumors had spread out of control. This was the first recorded necklacing. Necklacing is where they douse you in petrol, put a tire around you, fill the tire with petrol, set you alight, what you burn. This was the first recorded necklacing, where they pulled the tire over her body and set her alight. While she was burning, the hyped crowd continued to stone her. Even after it was clear that she was dead, they continued beating her. This set the tone for necklacing in the years to come. These political funerals became a roadshow of death, with a license for thugs to murder and maim in the name of freedom. In 2021, on 21st July of 1985, the state president, P.W. Botha, declared a state of emergency in 36 districts. Many youths who were the main culprits of the violence were detained without trial. This added fuel to the already out-of-control political fire. Parents had no idea where to find their children and could not trace them. Further to the violence, an aggressive consumer boycott crept up on the township dwellers. The boycott made it easy for extortionists' actions by powerful militants. Reports of consumers having to pay R3.50 for a 50-cent loaf of bread and other exorbitant prices for household essentials. The goal of the boycott was the withdrawal of troops from the war-torn townships and the release of all detainees. The people who were mostly affected by the boycotts were the township people themselves. Similarly, with the education boycott, where hundreds of thousands of black school children boycotted the schooling system, those affected here were again the township people. In fact, the education boycott became the biggest headache for the government at the time. The violence being committed in the townships was mostly by school children. The boycott was becoming more and more unpopular amongst parents, and the Liberate Now, Educate Later campaign was met with resistance. The youth were out of control, and the township residents who too cowed to mobilize against them. However, in time, some residents managed to achieve this. It was not an act that indicated resident support of apartheid government, but merely an attempt to regain control of their own lives. And they were fed up with the intimidation This set the stage for violent clashes between the youths and the older residents, now known as vigilantes. It was a big thing then. Unrest accelerated, and many police, councillors, and other local figures' houses were stoned and burned. On 18 May 1985, at Crossroads in the Eastern Cape, savage fighting broke out between the vigilantes and the youths. By the time the police regained control of the situation, over 50 people had been killed. The ANC stepped up its propaganda campaign against the vigilantes with a radio broadcast on Radio Freedom, accusing them of being the apartheid government's puppets. Death to the vigilantes was the message. The government slapped heavier restrictions on the township dwellers, curfews and bans on political gatherings, possession of political paraphernalia, possession of weapons, and other restrictions were implemented. The West was being dragged into the ANC struggle. Escalating sanctions were becoming a way of life for South Africans at the time. The ANC propaganda and carefully written press reports covered up the brutal tactics being used by the parties opposing the government. The picture being painted by the ANC was that the police and army patrols were out of control thugs who were responsible for the killing and the violence that was spreading throughout South Africa. There was also a marked increase in Soviet support for the ANC and the South African Communist Party. Weapons trainings and general financial support was stepped up. As a result, attacks on police and army were intensified. 2 policemen were necklaced in Shoshanguve and Attridgeville. Police were drawing fire repeatedly in the townships, and more policemen were singled out and burned alive. Hand grenade attacks on off-duty policemen were becoming commonplace. It was clear that the ANC was intensifying its military campaign against the security forces. On the 16th of December 1986, Oliver Tambo released a statement on Radio Freedom. "We are witnessing today the masses steadily taking to arms. We are in the midst of death-defying deeds where combat groups, supported by the people, are erecting barricades, stringing barbed wire across the roads, digging defense trenches, driving enemy forces into death traps, raining petrol bombs against armored vehicles, arming themselves by dispossessing the enemy of their weapons, ridding our township of informers and collaborators, eliminating enemy personnel." Okay. There you go. This type of propaganda prompted the youth of the township to take up arms in the belief that Inkontiwisi was winning the fight on the ground against the security forces. The riot police were at the center of attention at the attacks that followed. The ANC and Inkatha were also at each other's throats. The Inkatha was, of course, the ANC's most powerful rival. The Inkatha was mainly Zulu supported, and it had a more peaceful plan to overthrow the apartheid government. Peaceful negotiations was their plan. The ANC responded with their plan to overthrow the apartheid government with revolutionary violence. Consequently, this resulted in friction mounting between the ANC and Inkatha. Attacks on Inkatha intensified in Natal, with the townships of KwaMashu hardest hit. Necklacing of Inkatha supporters was the order of the day. Obviously, the Inkatha supporters could not be expected to stand idly while their leaders and friends were brutally murdered. They retaliated by killing 6 ANC supporters. This was the beginning of an all-out civil war, which could spread across the nation. Isolated tit-for-tat incidents began taking place across South Africa. The ANC began a propaganda campaign that portrayed Inkatha as traitors who had no education and described them as clover, a derogative term meaning country bumpkin. The rising death toll called for an increase in police presence and put an emphasis on the urgency for peace talks between the ANC and the Inkatha parties. 1987 saw COSATU's living wage campaign, where workers were urged to embark on a prolonged strike action. The largest of these strikes was the South African Transport Services, SATS,